Russian journalist and radio host of American origin who has a vast experience working in large state-owned media holdings and will tell us a little about TV and radio journalism in a new technological environment. Dear team, please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much for having me. I've been supporting BRICS even since before BRICS was even a thing, so it's good to be here as part of this lead up to the youth camp. It's quite an honor. Now, today, like you just said, the big question was related to journalism and technology, which is kind of interesting, and I have 3 points to make that I'm going to kind of break down. The first point is about degrees in the modern world, as in diplomas. The second is about our workspace environment, working from home and all of that. And the third part will be about women in journalism, which is probably something most people wouldn't expect from me. So anyways, we're going to talk about this in the context of BRICS, about thinking in different ways, because you have to remember that right now the world is changing, and the BRICS world is a world that loves tradition and stands for more traditional conservative values. But at the same time, one of the reasons the world changed and we lost our traditional conservative values is because of things like the Industrial Revolution and the fact that the world itself changed. So now, ultimately, what's happening in the world outside of the West is we think our grand mission is being in a quest to sort of find the mechanisms and systems to make it so that way we could live a conservative, humanistic, traditional lifestyle, yet function given the way the technology is today. So anyways, point number one that I wanted to make was about degrees or diplomas and all of that. Friends, as technology has evolved, the idea of a journalism degree is kind of fading out. In fact, we're starting to see, especially looking at the experience of the Western world, but we can even see throughout Russia, the necessity of having a degree for many professions seems to not really be there. We have sort of created this large social problem by taking people who are 17 or 18 years old and then forcing them to essentially screw around at school for another 4 years in order to then kind of start to begin their life. And what happens is demographic problems, because we're essentially wasting people's young years in this pursuit of pieces of paper and magical stamps. We can definitely see that in professions. Like, I actually have a design degree, which, to be honest, could have been done intensively in 1 year. Mine took 3 years. I did it in a sort of, what was that called? I want to say it in Russian. Uproshennom vidye. Basically, I did it faster than normal. It should have taken 4 years by the official bureaucracy. And with journalism, to be honest, with some of the basic fundamentals of journalism, this could really all be taught in a university in 1 year. Because if you don't know how to speak or you don't know how to write and you can't understand the fundamental principles and ethics behind journalism after a year of being in university and after 18-ish years of existence on the planet, then maybe you don't belong in journalism anyways. We need to get more people out there, because really one of the key things that we have to understand going into the 21st century is that these degrees, these stamps, these stupid pieces of paper and bureaucracy don't mean anything. Experience really does. And most of the best journalists out there, if you'd ask them what was more important, working for 4 years in the field and doing stuff, or 4 years of university, I think you will find very, very few people who would say that university experience was vastly more important. Of course, like I said, maybe a 1 year degree is still necessary to beat the fundamentals of the profession into people's heads. But ultimately, as we go forward, this whole idea of a journalism degree is just nonsense. Especially, that might anger some of you because Russians like their formality. But I can tell you one thing. All the fantastic Western journalists who write absolute lies and absurdity and madness, not only about Russia, but about China and India, and basically all the future members of BRICS. They all have amazing Ivy League degrees, sometimes even master's degrees, and yet that master's degree certainly hasn't helped them find the truth, has it? So that's first point about journalism in the 21st century based on technology. The second is we have gone through and we have all experienced this sort of phase of working from home due to a certain illness. And I have to tell you that this is another important thing. Again, this concept from, say, the middle of the 20th century, that if we have a news organization, everyone must sit at the desk, and everyone must sit at that desk for 8 hours and beat that keyboard in order to do something. This is nuts. This is not the way the world works. This is especially not how journalism works. If we need to, say, have journalists essentially write 2 little or 3 or 4 little articles a day about some news that's happening, why do they need to be at an office? There's no reason for that. If someone is more of an investigative journalist and they are, say, going around and doing interviews and making a lot of phone calls, in fact, being in the office is actually a detriment to them. The real purpose of having any sort of office or station or hub for news media is only in order to film things in a very nice way. As you can see behind me, the picture you're seeing is not exactly amazing. This isn't video that's going to wow you. You know, it takes a lot of money even today, even with the cost of producing television and high-end media has actually really gone down over the years. Still, the average journalist is not going to be able to have a 3-camera setup where every camera costs $5,000 in a specialized soundproof room, and then have a $5,000 to $10,000 editing station. That's unrealistic. I think the purpose of the office or the workspace is essentially for this high technology, extremely expensive cameras, green screen work if that's needed, that sort of thing. As we go into the 21st century, I really actually think that the office needs to die as a concept. It is, in a lot of ways, a very... and especially with journalism being something that's more on the side of the humanities and more of a creative, in a way, sort of environment, offices are the death of creativity. So why do we do this? You know, if we need some person to write, to take some major headlines and turn those major headlines into 3 or 4 articles a day, why not have them at home? Why not? There's absolutely no reason. And in fact, they're probably going to work in a much more productive, higher quality way than at some office. The office needs to die. It is a relic of the mid-20th century. And of course, don't take this to an extreme. The other day I saw a lovely video in the Moscow Metro of how they're making the new e-Volga trains. And obviously the men that make those trains need to be at the factory to have physical contact with the trains that they're making. That makes sense. Do journalists need to sit in some big, dehumanizing, cramped office in silence, beating away at keyboards anymore? No, that died a long time ago. In fact, that really, in that environment, should have been dead the day that they made internet that went faster than 56 kilobytes a second, or whatever it used to be when I was a child. Okay, so that's point number 2 about the future of journalism, which kind of ties into point number 3 about women in journalism. And this is where I'm going to get in trouble today, but that's okay. You got to speak the truth. That's part of the business, right? So, we, again, like I said before, in our BRICS countries, we are supposedly, at least, on the side of traditional values and conservatism. We all have our traditional religions and values. We all have our, Jesus Christ, the Prophet Muhammad, Buddha, and then we get in the philosophers of Confucius. We already had just mentioned Pushkin, who for many Russians is in some ways a sort of more abstract form of a philosopher about the Russian soul and all that other stuff, right? So we're trying to look back and see value in this. Okay, well, when it comes to journalism, I can say one thing, that when I look around myself, I have a lot of female colleagues. Maybe that's a Russia thing. In certain cultures, certain professions, kind of lean towards certain genders, but in Russia, we definitely see a lot of journalists who are women. And one thing I can see is that their journalist profession, again, being trapped in the middle of the 20th century, from a Western way of looking at things, is very much does not allow women to live a more traditional lifestyle. If we go back to a medieval village in Eastern Europe, there was a lot of women did work. Okay, this is sort of one of these things. We have to remember that when people in the West and in English talk about traditional values, they're referring to the nuclear family. They're referring to husband and wife, 2 kids and a dog, living in a separate individual residence in the 1950s. This is not a traditional lifestyle. This is what people think it is, but that's because they don't remember before World War II. A medieval village was much different, and women actually did participate a lot in the economic activity of said village. Men did things that were generally dirty, dangerous, required brute force, and sometimes more on the side of teamwork. Women did a lot of things that were not just dealing with children, such as making all of the clothing that everyone wore, a lot of the handicrafts, which were very important, the cooking and all that, which in a medieval village was a lot more than microwaving dinner. Okay, so women contributed a lot to society. However, they contributed a lot to society, especially, I believe she's a feminist author named, quoting a feminist author here today, it's a rare one. I believe her name is Mary Hartington, I believe, who's British, made the point that a lot of the things that women did back then allowed for pauses. So, if you're working a loom and putting together clothing and textiles as a woman, your kid needs something, you don't have to keep going with this. It's not like Men on the Hunt or, someone's working the forge, hammering out iron. You can't just, stop. You have to keep going. And in a lot of ways, I don't see why in the 21st century, women can't have it all by being able to have motherhood, but then also maybe being able to sort of do journalism, especially in the written form, which in a lot like working a loom or the sort of cooking or other handiwork of the medieval times would allow women to have something that's a bit productive outside the realm of just the kids and just inside the home, but also have the kids in the home. Because trust me, as you go around Moscow, again, we supposedly believe in traditional values. Well, the average, journalist out there is a woman who's 35 years old and single, because sitting at that office for 8 hours a day takes up all of her time. And we don't present this profession as a wonderful opportunity to both be able to do something very interesting that involves a lot of communication, that could give women a lot of fulfillment, that could also allow them to have the fulfillment of being in a family. Again, after the whole virus thing went around the planet and we all started working from home, I don't understand why we haven't put 2 and 2 together. Because for the BRICS countries, if we're to have some sort of feminism, which, if we must, then it should be a feminism that allows women to have essentially, to have it all, like they ironically did in medieval times. So this is another thing where you just look at the journalism and you look at so many young women who are their professional choice, the choice they made to go into a certain profession, forces them from 18 to 22, sometimes even older to 23. I think some journalism degree in Russia, are actually 5 years. Then some people go for the master's degree. So you've essentially wasted 10 years of your fleeting youth on what doesn't need to be done, just in order to then start to build the professional experience, which actually does matter. And even then, forcing people to work in an office for a profession that does not require physical presence, again, is horrible for demographics. It's horrible for the family. And I think for a lot of people, except for people who are really, really, really extroverted, it is horribly bad for their spirit. So I just want to say that address these sorts of problems as we go into the 21st century. That, again, if we are this new BRICS alternative, we're the alternative to the West. We are the bastion, the flag bearers of traditional and conservative values, especially you young people who are listening, who are now 18, 19, 20, starting this all off. If so, why should we continue to work, especially in terms of journalism, as if we are stuck in the middle of the 20th century without the internet and without the historical experiences that have happened after that? So anyways, that's basically all I wanted to say about journalism, were those 3 points. Degrees are a massive waste of time when experience is vastly better, and this applies to vastly more than just journalism. The office needs to die, except as a place to do extremely high-quality recordings, this, that, or the other, where you need expensive equipment and someone needs to go on camera like me with my lovely voice and be the host of a program. That is still relevant and will be for the foreseeable future. and that the way journalism works as a female-dominated profession, at least in Russia, this being trapped in the 20th century is extremely horrible for families. It needlessly robs women of the right to have children because, again, if we believe in conservative values, don't women have the right to have children? Think about it that way. Anyways, I hope this was at least somewhat interesting or informative, or at least I hope I answered the question you actually asked me. Anyways, if that's all, I might have to bail. You can find me on Telegram or VK. You can send your love or hate to me 24 hours a day.
Thank you, Tim. It was really interesting, and I see the participants are actively discussing your ideas in the chat and that they agree with you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes, dear participants, please don't forget to write your questions in the Zoom chat to our experts. And I would like to say that next week we are going to have the final list of the camp